All right, what's up, everybody? Pat yourself on the back. You made it through nothing but to bet on except, baseball. If you did bet, probably lost some money during that. But we made it to week zero of college football here, and I'm just gonna go ahead go over some picks that I had made. I'm gonna recap the ones I made over on my Twitch stream, get y'all caught up to date, let you know where my thoughts are, and decide we're gonna play. So starting off with the doubling game, you got Iowa State, Kansas State, big rivalry over there. I don't know why they put it over there. Makes no sense for colleges to be going international, in my opinion. But here we are. And going into this game, I want to say the line currently sits at -3. It originally opened at -3.5, I want to say. And I'm kind of liking it to stay right there, in my opinion. So you could go ahead and take an alternate spread to bring it back to 3.5. My way of thinking on this is, look, you got Iowa State lost two 1,000-yard receivers from last year. They're having question marks on their offensive line. I know so is Kansas State, but I know Iowa has an actual guy that's injured. Offensive line is usually pretty strong, but going into it with an injury already, with how are you going to replace that 1,000-yard seasons, that those receivers had? It's going to be tough. You're going to want to run the ball more, and the depleted kind of offensive line, that's not exactly what you want, especially when you're already traveling to Dublin from Iowa State. It's kind of a red flag right there. I know same for Kansas State. Yes, there's question marks on their offensive line as well. But they retained some more players coming back in. I like their quarterback in what's his name? Avery Johnson, I believe. And they got that running back. They're gonna try to RPO you to death. And I feel like that's exactly how this is gonna go. You see a ground and pound game also. Won't be surprised if you kind of see an under low scoring game here, as both teams are going to like to run. Neither are really too explosive. Kansas State, however, is a little bit more explosive than Iowa State. At least on paper going into the season, it's week zero. We don't really know what to expect from these teams, but just kind of looking at the roster, that's the way that I'm kind of looking at this. All right, for our next game, you got Idaho State at UNLV, which, as a Gators fan, got Dan Mullen over there now at UNLV, and we're going to see what he brings to this team. They started off a little rocky last year, had some quarterback drama. I don't think the guy got paid or something, and the backup came in, and they started clicking towards the end. And they're playing against Idaho State, which I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about this team. However, I did look up real quick and saw that Idaho State is actually 5-2 to the under when playing against FBS teams. And that's kind of what I'm liking towards this game as well. Under 66.5, in my opinion, that's just way too high of a total. And what's probably going to be treated like a preseason game for UNLV. New system, new coach, a lot of transfer players coming in. I heard they're going to be rotating two quarterbacks, which is it's gonna mess with the pace of the game a little bit. It's going to be kind of hard to get in the flow of things running that two quarterback system, especially when they're vastly different quarterbacks. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, with I just don't see 66.5. I feel like that is way too high. The only way I could actually see this hitting is if UNLV themselves push this total a little bit closer to 66, maybe score like 50 themselves. I see this more as like a 40, 14, 37, 17 kind of game, maybe in favor of UNLV. With the preseason in mind, like on my, which what I was thinking, I kind of feel like this is going to be treated like a preseason game. And I also don't like the backdoor spread here for Idaho State. Plus 26.5 is a big number for a week zero game, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually cover that as well. But the under 66.5 is a way better play, way safer option, in my opinion. What else we got here? We got the night game. I guess I'll just do in order what I have on the screen instead of the order what the games are going on. Oh, we got Stanford and Hawaii. It's playing at Hawaii. You know, I'm honestly kind of shocked to see Hawaii favored in this game. I don't believe they've had a winning season under their head coach right yet. Yet, he's like they went 5-7 last year, and I know Stanford has the NFL coach, the Colts old coach, Frank Wright. or whatever his last name is. I can't think of it off the top of my mind, but y'all know who I'm talking about. Yeah, he's the interim coach right now for Stanford. He's filling in. Look, week zero, I feel like the big difference, if not roster, is going to be coaching, and I don't really see too much difference between the rosters on this team. Maybe Hawaii has some better athletes, but Stanford definitely has the better coaching staff. And I know Stanford's only looking at, I'm pretty sure their win total is over and under 3.5 right now, or going into the season. And to me, this is one of those three games, that Stanford can actually win. I won't be surprised if they actually do take this game. Like I said, I feel like they have the better coaching staff. Um, let's see. I know Hawaii's offense last year was horrible. I want to say I looked up and they were ranked 112. There's only 136 teams, so that's not saying much. Stanford's secondary was also trash last year. But Hawaii and honestly Stanford too, they're both bringing in backup quarterbacks from last season. Stanford's bringing in a transfer from Oregon State, I believe, who did all right. He didn't get too much shine. Same with Hawaii's quarterback coming into the season. From the shine that he did have, he didn't really look that great, which kind of led them to benching him. And now he's starting, getting a chance to shine right here. Hopefully, they're hoping he could take that offense, make the next step, take it to the next level. But we'll see what they got. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see an under in this game as well. But I feel like the better value right now is giving Stanford a field goal at +3.5. Um, yeah, that's my breakdown on that one. It's just crazy to finish off with yeah, but look, I just don't want to hit all with all unders here because my next game right here, Sam Houston, Western Kentucky, I'm also going with the under 60.5. That's again, I feel like 60 totals in week zero is just kind of crazy. I know Western Kentucky, they're kind of the poster child of the CUSA. Sam Houston had a Cinderella season almost last year. I think they went 10-3, if I'm not mistaken. And I know they got a new head coach this year who does like to push the tempo. So maybe that's where they're kind of looking at it with the under 60.5, with the 60.5 kind of line. That's probably where they're looking at it, like, oh, they're going to push the tempo. But let's be honest, both of these teams, I think Western Kentucky only had three games go over 60 last season, because Sam Houston had maybe two or three themselves. And as a week zero game, filling it out, I heard Sam Houston has three quarterbacks that are actually fighting for the starting job right now. And I don't know if that's actually a good thing when you're this close to the season. That either tells me all three guys really ain't, they're really not shining like that. And last year they played this game also went under this total. So we're just gonna rock with under 60.5. It's the safe play. Week zero, 60 points. Crazy. And then last but not least, you got Fresno at Kansas. And look, you got Kansas, new stadium. They're gonna be feeding off the energy. Home Rock Chalk is gonna be jumping. So I feel like they're gonna feed off that energy right now. My real pick on this was honestly Kansas. First half spread 6.5, but I seen they boosted that up to 7.5, which to me is a little rocky. It gets a little iffy right there. Like, do you really see them being up by 10? And the spread itself is only at 14. It opened up at 12.5, I believe. So to see them, picking them to be over at least more than a touchdown at halftime is a little dicey in my opinion. However, I do like first quarter spread at 4.5. I feel like I said, new stadium gonna be feeding off the energy. I feel like that definitely fuels things. The Rock Chalk Nation's gonna get them jumping. Here they go. So I see them ending the first quarter, honestly, up by a touchdown. And those are gonna be my picks. Let's get week zero going. Let's start off with a bang. 5 games. Let's see if we go 5-0 with them, or at least, 4-1. I'll be pleasantly happy with. So later, y'all.